Mermay lived in an upstairs room of a Chinatown dwelling house. There were other little Chinese women living on the same floor, but Mermay never went amongst them. She was not as they were. She was a cripple. A fall had twisted her legs so that she moved around with difficulty and scarred her face so terribly that none save Lin John cared to look upon it. Lin John, her brother, was a laundryman, working for another of his countrymen. Lin John and Mermay had come to San Francisco with their parents when they were small children. Their mother had died the day she entered the foreign city, and the father the week following, both having contracted a fever on the steamer. Mermay and Lin John were then taken in charge by their father's brother, and although he was a poor man, he did his best for them until called away by death. Long before her uncle died, Mermay had met with the accident that had made her not as other girls, but that had only strengthened her brother's affection, and old Lin Wan died happy in the knowledge that Lin John would ever put Mermay before himself. So Mermay lived in her little upstairs room, cared for by Lin John, and scarcely an evening passed that he did not call to see her. One evening, however, Lin John failed to appear, and Mermay began to feel very sad and lonely. Mermay could embroider all day in contented silence if she knew that in the evening someone would come to whom she could communicate all the thoughts that filled a small black head that knew nothing of life save what it saw from an upstairs window. Mermay's window looked down upon the street, and she would sit for hours, pressed close against it, watching those who passed below and all that took place. That day she had seen many things which she had put into her mental portfolio for Lin John's edification when evening should come. 2 yellow-robed priests had passed below on their way to the Joss house in the next street. A little bird with a white breast had fluttered against the window pane. A man carrying an image of a gambling cash tiger had entered the house across the street, and 6 young girls of about her own age, dressed gaily as if to attend a wedding, had also passed over the same threshold. But when 9 o'clock came and no Lin John, the girl began to cry softly. She did not often shed tears, but for some reason unknown to Mermay herself, the sight of those joyous girls caused sad reflections. In the midst of her weeping, a timid knock was heard. It was not Lin John. He always gave a loud rap, then entered without waiting to be bidden. Mermay hobbled to the door, pulled it open, and there, in the dim light of the hall without, beheld a young girl, the most beautiful young girl that Mermay had ever seen, and she stood there extending to Mermay a blossom from a Chinese lily plant. Mermay understood the meaning of the offered flower, and accepting it, beckoned for her visitor to follow her into her room. What a delightful hour that was to Mermay! She forgot that she was scarred and crippled, and she and the young girl chattered out their little hearts to one another. Lin John is dear, but one can't talk to a man, even if he is a brother, as one can to one the same as oneself, said Mermay to Sin Far, her new friend, and Sin Far, the meaning of whose name was pure flower, or Chinese lily, answered. Yes, indeed. The woman must be the friend of the woman, and the man the friend of the man. Is it not so in the country that heaven loves? What beneficent spirit moved you to come to my door? Asked Mermay. I know not, replied Sin Far, save that I was lonely. We have but lately moved here, my sister's husband, and myself. My sister is a bride, and there is much to say between her and her husband. Therefore, in the evening, when the day's duties are done, I am alone. Several times, hearing that you were sick, I ventured to your door, but failed to knock, because always when I drew near, I heard the voice of him whom they call your brother. Tonight, as I returned from an errand for my sister, I heard only the sound of weeping, so I hastened to my room and plucked the lily for you. The next evening, when Lin John explained how he had been obliged to work the evening before, Mermay answered brightly that was all right. She loved him just as much as ever and was just as glad to see him as ever, but if work prevented him from calling, he was not to worry. She had found a friend who would cheer her loneliness. Lin John was surprised, but glad to hear such news, and it came to pass that when he beheld Sin Far, her sweet and gentle face, her pretty drooped eyelids and arched eyebrows, he began to think of apple and peach and plum trees showering their dainty blossoms in the country that heaven loves.
It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Lin John, working in his laundry, paid little attention to the street uproar and the clang of the engines rushing by. He had no thought of what it meant to him and would have continued at his work undisturbed had not a boy put his head into the door and shouted, "Lin John, the house in which your sister lives is on fire." The tall building was in flames when Lin John reached it. The uprising tongues licked his face as he sprung up the ladder no other man dared ascend. "I will not go. It is best for me to die," and Merme resisted her friend with all her puny strength. "The ladder will not bear the weight of both of us." "You are his sister," calmly replied Sin Far. "But he loves you best. You and he can be happy together. I am not fit to live." "May Lin John decide, Merme?" "Yes, Lin John may decide." Lin John reached the casement. For one awful second he wavered. Then his eyes sought the eyes of his sister's friend. "Come, Merme," he called. "Where is Sin Far?" asked Merme when she became conscious. "Sin Far is in the land of happy spirits. And I am still in this sad, dark world." "Speak not so, little one. Your brother loves you and will protect you from the darkness." "But you loved Sin Far better, and she loved you." Lin John bowed his head. "Alas," wept Merme, "that I should live to make others sad." "Nay," said Lin John, "Sin Far is happy. And I did my duty with her approval, at her bidding. How then, little sister, can I be sad?" The smuggling of Tai Ko. Amongst the daring men who engage in contrabanding Chinese from Canada into the United States, Jack Fabian ranks as the boldest in deed, the cleverest in scheming, and the most successful in outwitting government officers. Uncommonly strong in person, tall and well-built, with fine features and a pair of keen, steady blue eyes, gifted with a sort of rough eloquence and of much personal fascination, it is no wonder that we fellows regard him as our chief and are bound to follow where he leads. With Fabian at our head, we engage in the wildest adventures and find such places of concealment for our human goods as none but those who take part in a desperate business would dare to dream of. Jack, however, is not in search of glory, money is his object. One day when a romantic friend remarked that it was very kind of him to help the poor Chinaman over the border, a cynical smile curled his mustache. "Kind," he echoed. "Well, I haven't yet had time to become sentimental over the matter. It is merely a matter of dollars and cents, though, of course, to a man of my strict principles, there is a certain pleasure to be derived from getting ahead of the government. A poor devil does now and then like to take a little out of those millionaire concerns." It was last summer and Fabian was somewhat down on his luck. A few months previously, to the surprise of us all, he had made a blunder, which resulted in his capture by American officers, and he and his companion, together with 5 unaccustomed Chinamen, had been lodged in a county jail to await trial. But loafing behind bars did not agree with Fabian's energetic nature, so one dark night, by means of a saw which had been given to him by a very innocent-looking visitor the day before, he made good his escape, and after a long, hungry, detective-hunted tramp through woods and bushes, found himself safe in Canada. He had had a 3-month sojourn in prison, and during that time some changes had taken place in smuggling circles. Some ingenious lawyers had devised a scheme by which any young Chinaman on payment of a couple of $100 could procure a father, which father would swear the young Chinaman was born in America, thus proving him to be an American citizen with the right to breathe United States air. And the Chinese themselves, assisted by some white men, were manufacturing certificates establishing their right to cross the border, and in that way were crossing over in large batches. That sort of trick naturally spoiled our fellow's business, but we all know that Yankee sharper games can hold good only for a short while, so we bided our time and waited in patience. Not so Fabian. He became very restless and wandered around with glowering looks. He was sitting one day in a laundry, the proprietor of which had sent out many a boy through our chief's instrumentality. Indeed, Fabian is said to have rushed over to Uncle Sam himself some 500 celestials, and if Fabian had not been an exceedingly generous fellow, he might now be a gentleman of leisure instead of an unimmortalized Rob Roy. Well, Fabian was sitting in the laundry of Chen Ting Lung and Company, telling a nice-looking young Chinaman that he was so broke that he'd be willing to take over even one man at a time. The young Chinaman looked thoughtfully into Fabian's face. "Would you take me?" he inquired. "Take you?" echoed Fabian. "Why, you are one of the bosses here. You don't mean to say that you are hankering after a place where it would take you years to get as high up in the washy business as you are now?" "Yes, I want go," replied Thai Company. "I want go to New York, and I will pay you $50 and all expense if you take me, and not say you take me to my partners." "There's no accounting for a Chinaman," muttered Fabian, but he gladly agreed to the proposal and a night was fixed. "What is the name of the firm you are going to?" inquired the white man. "Chinamen who intend being smuggled always make arrangements with some Chinese firm in the States to receive them." Tycho hesitated, then mumbled something which sounded like Kwangwi Yuan or Long Lo Tun. Fabian was not sure which, but did not repeat the question, not being sufficiently interested. He left the laundry, nodding goodbye to Tycho as he passed outside the window, and the Chinaman nodded back, a faint smile on his small, delicate face lingering until Fabian's receding form was lost to view. It was a pleasant night on which the two men set out. Fabian had a rig waiting at the corner of the street. Tycho, dressed in citizen's clothes, stepped into it unobserved, and the smuggler and would-be smuggled were soon out of the city. They had a merry drive, for Fabian's liking for Tycho was very real. He had known him for several years, and the lad's quick intelligence interested him. The second day they left their horse at a farmhouse, where Fabian would call for it on his return trip, crossed a river in a rowboat before the sun was up, and plunged into a wood in which they would remain till evening. It was raining, but through mud and wind and rain they trudged slowly and heavily. Tycho paused now and then to take breath. Once Fabian remarked, "You are not a very strong lad, Thai Company. It's a pity you have to work as you do for your living," and Tycho had answered, "Work velly good. No work, Tycho die." Fabian looked at the lad protectingly, wondering in a careless way why this Chinaman seemed to him so different from the others. "Wouldn't you like to be back in China?" he asked. "No," said Tycho decidedly. "Why?" "I not know why," answered Thai Company. Fabian laughed. "Haven't you got a nice little wife at home?" he continued. "I hear you people marry very young." "No, I no wife," asserted his companion with a choky little laugh. "I never have no wife." "Nonsense," joked Fabian. "Why, Tycho, think how nice it would be to have a little woman cook your rice and to love you." "I not have wife," repeated Tycho seriously. "I not like woman, I like man." "You confirmed old bachelor," ejaculated Fabian. "I like you," said Tycho, his boyish voice sounding clear and sweet in the wet woods. "I like you so much that I want go to New York, so you make $50. I know flend in New York." "What?" exclaimed Fabian. "Oh, I sully I tell you, Tycho velly sully," and the Chinese boy shuffled on with bowed head.
Look here, Tycho, said Fabian, I won't have you do this for my sake. You have been very foolish, and I don't care for your $50. I do not need it half as much as you do. Good God! How ashamed you make me feel, I who have blown in my thousands in idle pleasures cannot take the little you have slaved for. We are in New York State now. When we get out of this wood we will have to walk over a bridge which crosses a river. On the other side, not far from where we cross, there is a railway station. Instead of buying you a ticket for the city of New York, I shall take train with you for Toronto. Tycho did not answer, he seemed to be thinking deeply. Suddenly he pointed to where some fallen trees lay. Two men run away behind there, cried he. Fabian looked round them anxiously, his keen eyes seemed to pierce the gloom in his endeavor to catch a glimpse of any person, but no man was visible, and, save the dismal sighing of the wind among the trees, all was quiet. There's no one, he said somewhat gruffly. He was rather startled, for they were a mile over the border and he knew that the government officers were on a sharp lookout for him, and felt, despite his strength, if any trick or surprise were attempted it would go hard with him. If they catch you with me it be too bad, sententiously remarked Ty Company. It seemed as if his words were in answer to Fabian's thoughts. But they will not catch us, so cheer up your heart, my boy, replied the latter, more heartily than he felt. If they come, and I not with you, they not take you and it be all light. Yes, assented Fabian, wondering what his companion was thinking about. They emerged from the woods in the dusk of the evening and were soon on the bridge crossing the river. When they were near the center, Tycho stopped and looked into Fabian's face. Man come for you, I not here, man no hurt you. And with the words he whirled like a flash over the rail. In another flash Fabian was after him. But though a first-class swimmer, the white man's efforts were of no avail, and Tycho was borne away from him by the swift current. Cold and dripping wet, Fabian dragged himself up the bank and found himself a prisoner. So your Chinaman threw himself into the river. What was that for? Asked one of the government officers. I think he was out of his head, replied Fabian. And he fully believed what he uttered. We tracked you right through the woods, said another of the captors. We thought once the boy caught sight of us. Fabian remained silent. Tycho's body was picked up the next day. Tycho's body, and yet not Tycho, for Tycho was a youth, and the body found with Tycho's face and dressed in Tycho's clothes was the body of a girl, a woman. Nobody in the laundry of Chen Ting Lung and Company, no Chinaman in Canada or New York, could explain the mystery. Tycho had come out to Canada with a number of other youths. Though not very strong, he had always been a good worker and very smart. He had been quiet and reserved among his own countrymen, had refused to smoke tobacco or opium, and had been a regular attendant at Sunday schools and a great favorite with mission ladies. Fabian was released in less than a week. No evidence against him, said the commissioner, who was not aware that the prisoner was the man who had broken out of jail but a month before. Fabian is now very busy. There are lots of boys taking his helping hand over the border, but none of them are like Tycho, and sometimes, between whiles, Fabian finds himself pondering long and earnestly over the mystery of Tycho's life and death.